Have you ever considered that we are living in a unique time, that something world-changing is about to happen, and that it might concern you? If so, you're in the right place. Keep listening, and you'll hear thought-provoking views behind the news that point to a new and better future for all. Many people now sense that humanity is not alone. So consider this. If the Christ or the Buddha walked among us today as modern men, would we recognize them? What would they be saying? And most importantly, would we listen? Every Sunday on this program, Share International Radio, we'll examine extraordinary events that are unfolding behind the headline news. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for. And now, welcome to this week's show.
Welcome to our listeners around the world, especially to those of you listening for the first time. My name is Cielito Pascual, podcasting from Seattle, Washington, and here on Share on the Air Radio, inspired by Share International Magazine, we present thought-provoking views behind the news as it relates to an extraordinary event unfolding in the world as we speak. Today we're presenting thought-provoking views behind history 2,000 years ago. A great event took place 2,000 years ago. A great event is taking place today. These are events that have occurred cyclically throughout the millennia, throughout human history. Yet what is taking place today is unprecedented in all of history. And so we have an hour to cover a lot of juicy topics. I have a wonderful guest with me. Before I introduce you to her, I just want to give a little background on our show. Every week, we describe an event. You know, as I said, these events happen cyclically throughout history. Great teachers of tremendous spiritual potency have emerged at critical junctures in time to guide humanity forward in the evolution of our consciousness, the humanity's consciousness. Some of the most familiar names of these teachers include Krishna, Buddha, Confucius, Jesus, and Muhammad. And today, many people around the world are aware of the emergence of elder figures of humanity known as the Masters of Wisdom, led by the eldest brother of humanity, Maitreya, the world teacher, also known as Maitreya the Christ. Now, if you're listening for the very first time, stay with us. We will explain on the show what all of this means, including the extraordinary possibility that this event is leading up to. Joining me today is artist, environmental activist, and student of the Esoteric Wisdom Teachings. All our guests have been students of the Esoteric Wisdom Teachings. Her name is Ann Finneran. She is speaking to us from the beautiful Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Cielito. It's nice to speak to you.
We have been friends for a very long time, involved in together as students of the Esoteric or Ageless Wisdom Teachings. We have known each other, and we've known this information. We've both given public talks together on this topic. So I'm thrilled that today we get to speak, and we have a worldwide audience. So thanks for taking the time. And today being Palm Sunday, next week will be Easter, where this is March 20th, 2016. You and I grew up in Roman Catholic families, and so we both share an interest in what the Gospels say and how it corresponds to the esoteric teachings and vice versa. So this is going to be a really rich discussion. And let me see where we shall start. I think I laid the groundwork. Why don't we start with you? You, as I said, raised in a Catholic home. You're a student of the Esoteric Wisdom Teachings. How do these two traditions deepen your understanding of the significance of this time of year Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday?
Well, having a familiarity with the esoteric teachings really enriches the gospel story. For instance, today is Palm Sunday, and the esoteric teachings do propose that there is a world teacher that comes every age, which is about every 2,150 years. And the teacher for the period that we've just gone through was the Christ, who worked through Jesus. And today being Palm Sunday, it was always my favorite holiday. Palm Sunday recognizes the period after, as Jesus had been giving all his talks around the area, and the word had grown about him. The rumor had risen that possibly he was the Messiah, and because of the healings and because of the wisdom in his speaking, people began to think that maybe he was. So there was this great parade they held in Jerusalem where he was placed on a donkey and ridden through the roads, and they threw palms in front of him and recognized him as the Messiah. And this was a tremendous event, but it also led to his downfall because the Romans and the rabbis, certain rabbis for sure, became threatened by this individual who they saw as a political threat. So the esoteric teachings is that he was the one for the age, the coming age, and to give the lessons for that age.
And you made a statement there that we will expound on. It might be new to our listeners. You said, right, Christ worked through Jesus. So let's talk about I'm checking our time here. Let's talk about who the Christ is, because that's a particular term. Who Jesus is, that's a particular term. And then I mentioned earlier, Maitreya, the world teacher. All of that is connected. And I think where we'll begin, I'll lay the groundwork by talking about what it is. I mentioned earlier, the masters of wisdom. And one thing to understand about the Ageless Wisdom teachings, and for those of you listening for the first time, you can go online to a fantastic website. All of our information is sourced from this website. It's share-international.org. That's share-international.org. That site is absolutely rich with information that goes into more detail on what we're discussing today. So when we talk about, and I will pause here, on every show we say, don't believe what we say. We are not sharing this information to convince people that what we're saying is true. The purpose of this show, my work as a host and my co-host Diana Gold-Holland, when she hosts the show, we're merely opening the door for the listener to explore further. You can decide to step through that door and learn more. Listen for your entertainment, however you want to take this information. But we hope people listen with an open mind, because you and I, Ann, feel this is incredibly relevant to helping us understand the times today. So maybe I'll hand it over to you. Would you like to give us a brief overview of what it is to be a master of wisdom, so that we can then explain who Jesus was, who the Christ is, and who Maitreya is?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. One of the distinctions of the Ageless Wisdom teachings is presupposing reincarnation as an actual fact in life. And as we go through our lives, we learn lessons which we carry over, consciously or not, generally unconsciously, into the next life. until we get to the point where we have learned enough that we realize our place in the world, our place with each other, our heart center opens up, the chakra opens up, and we experience expansions of consciousness through the next incarnations. And when we're done with that process, these expansions of consciousness called initiations, when we're completely done with the process on Earth, we achieve the point of full enlightenment and full physical perfection and emotional and mental perfection, so that we're essentially done on this planet, and we can move on to other realms of experience as souls.
Can I depict here what that looks like, what a being of that quality looks like, that will be very vivid for people? Imagine being completely harmless in thought, completely harmless in speech, and completely harmless in action. That is enlightenment. That is perfectionment from the esoteric perspective. Go ahead.
And totally wise in the process. So a number of humans, when they've achieved this process and become masters, rather than go on to other realms of learning, elect to stay behind and help the rest of humanity evolve. And some of the terms from various religions are masters or saints or bodhisattva, people that elect to sacrifice their own evolution for the sake of the rest of humanity. And that's what the masters who have stayed on the earth are to us. They are here to help us. They are here to guide us. They generally work through inspiration. However, the news that's going on now, that's now in the world today, these masters are coming through.
And we will continue
publicly
to explain how Jesus fits into this. Stay after the break.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Every night, when the skies are clear, a remarkable event can be witnessed. A UFO the size of 5 football fields is moving through the skies just like a star. It pulses, it blinks, it changes color. This spacecraft appeared before as the Star of Bethlehem. Find out what it all means. Visit shareontheairradio.org. That's shareontheairradio.org.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know, I tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
We're back with Ann Finneran speaking to us from the Catskills in New York on the life of Jesus from the baptism to the crucifixion and the esoteric significance of his life. So we're going to jump right back in here, and you were describing who the Masters of Wisdom are. They choose to, instead of evolving on to greater and greater planes of existence, they choose to remain with the human family to be of service. And you were saying that there's many numbers of Masters of Wisdom who have chosen to do this. And I wanted to point out that for millennia upon millennia, they have worked behind the scenes of human evolution and not working overtly. And one of the most significant things about this emergence event today that we are describing, which is underway as we're speaking. This is not a far-off time that we're prognosticating. The Masters of Wisdom are emerging into full public life for the first time in many, many, many millennia. So, again, that's food for thought for you to investigate, listener. We will continue with our story. So, let's go ahead and bring in who is Jesus in the context of the Masters of Wisdom.
Okay. Well, Jesus was a real historical individual. Our information is that he was born Joshua Panthera in around 24 BC. The biblical historians place him at 4 BC because of an astronomical event at that time, and so that it would tie in with Herod's life. King Herod, who was alive when Jesus was born, died in 4 BC. So, but our information is that he was actually born a couple decades earlier. He and his family were probably Essenes, which was a Messianic Jewish sect who lived communally, did not sacrifice animals, and generally removed themselves from what they saw as questionable moral practices of the other Jewish sects. Jesus knew who he was. His parents knew that he had a purpose in his life to give this teaching. And when he went into his adult public life at the age of 30, he was. We hear of John the Baptist presenting him before the world and introducing a great prophet who was coming. And John the Baptist publicly brought him out to the world through a baptism he performed. And at the time of the baptism, the master of all the masters, the one who holds the office of the Christ, held it at that time, Maitreya, the world teacher, overshadowed Jesus at that time. Now, overshadowing is a process where the individual is fully conscious, fully aware of what is going on, but also infused with the thoughts and energy of the master that does the overshadowing. And so it was for Jesus, who was overshadowed by Maitreya for the full of his 3 years of public life, from the baptism to the crucifixion.
So let's pause here, because you've thrown out some new ideas for people. Let's explain. We've explained Jesus as being a relatively ordinary man with a very distinct purpose, and you've mentioned Maitreya, as I said, the eldest brother of humanity. And the term Christ, how does the esotericist define the term Christ? We hear Jesus Christ, we hear Maitreya the Christ.
Right. Christ is a term used as an office in the spiritual hierarchy of masters. And not every planetary system has a Christ. We are blessed to have someone who has gone through the process to literally embody the energy. When you said office, I just wanted to make it clear for the audience, like office, like the president. So the president, right, like is a president, like a position, and he holds the position of world teacher, but also the Christ. And being the Christ means that one embodies the love aspect, and it fully embodies it. And he also is embodies the soul of humanity. So as he says, every note, tone of love that is registered in your heart is felt in mine. So he is fully one with us all, and that is his role. Jesus, I just want to say really quickly, Jesus was not entirely ordinary. He had gone through 3 of the 5 initiations I had mentioned earlier, the 3 of the 5 expansions of consciousness. So he was a pretty evolved dude, especially at the time of that we're talking about 2,000 years ago, when a lot of people were really very unconscious.
And again, these are initiations that you and I and everyone listening and every human being will go through. And just for a sense of scale, those of us involved in this work, those of us involved in spiritual pursuits or even activist pursuits, working unselfishly for the betterment of the world, we're roughly around, the 1 to in between, 1 and 1.5 initiation. So at the time of in Jesus' life, what was his initiation?
He was a 3rd degree initiate, which means he was a fully perfected personality. His vehicles had become pretty pure.
And again, if you visit share-international.org, there's a lot more detail on evolution, reincarnation, and initiation. But we'll continue here in explaining. So let me just see. I had a note here. So Maitreya, the eldest brother of humanity, first being to be perfected, first member of the human earth race to be completely harmless in thought, word, and action. Fast forward, I don't know how many millennia, he's overshadowing Jesus. What's the purpose of that? Why did he, if Jesus was pretty highly evolved as a 3rd degree initiate, what was the purpose of being overshadowed at the baptism?
Yeah, this is generally during the various ages, as I said, every 2,000 to 2,150 years. The teacher at that time has always been a fairly highly evolved disciple of the ageless wisdom teachings, and whether perceived in that way or not, possibly through other religions or philosophies, the teacher has generally used a disciple through whom to convey the teachings. So this has been a process through the ages.
Oh, okay.
The Buddha was overshadowed by Prince Gautama was overshadowed by the Buddha. Krishna was, I believe, overshadowed by Maitreya as well. The Hercules was, I believe, overshadowed by the Buddha. It goes on and on. I wouldn't quote me on those, but that is generally the process. The disciple is ready, willing, and able to take in these energies and to sacrifice his life to the conveying of the teaching for the coming age.
How's this distinct from channeling?
It's very distinct from channeling, because usually channeling comes through the solar plexus chakra. The individual is frequently unconscious, and the individual is not in full control. And in the overshadowing process, you are fully awake. You're aware of what's going on. It's kind of like, wow, this is really cool what all this stuff is going on. Well, I mean, that's my perspective, would be when you're being overshadowed, you're aware of what's happening. It's like you are yourself, but also allowing these thoughts and these communications to convey through you.
So it's likely, it's likely that Jesus, being a 3rd degree initiate, and the average good person might be a first-degree initiate. I probably can't be overshadowed at this point. My vehicle is probably not durable enough. So let's move forward here. So what ideas did Jesus introduce at the time that were revolutionary? In that period after the baptism, he's being overshadowed by this very potent energy of Maitreya. Let's back up. What was his message for the time?
Well, his message was love, which was really revolutionary at that time. People just went on with their lives. They took care of themselves. They took care of their family. They did, with various responsibilities. But the idea of love was totally revolutionary. Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. This is the great and first commandment. The second, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And both of those are really revolutionary, because for the God at the time was a God that should be feared and obeyed and followed the rules, because you don't want retribution. And this was loving God.
And people were giving blood sacrifices to appease God, because they imagine God as this wrathful character who would all the earthquakes and storms were because God was expressing his wrath.
Right, and the other commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, was possibly even more revolutionary. So that there's one passage in Paul, who was one of the apostles who came after Jesus had died. Woman, obey your husband. Husband, love your wife. And it was the husband, love your wife, which was the more radical aspect of that.
Well, we'll delve into that a little bit more after the break. If you have any questions and you're listening live, go to our Facebook page, Share on the Air Radio, and post a question there, and hopefully we will have time to answer it. Stay with us after the break.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The Awakening of Humanity by Benjamin Creme is a concise, prophetic book about momentous changes soon to occur. It focuses on an unprecedented event, the emergence into full public life of Maitreya, the world teacher. Download the book free online. Visit shareontheairradio.org. That's shareontheairradio.org. shareontheairradio.org.
Hey ladies, do you want to have that good hair day feeling all the time? Gentlemen, would you want your special someone to have that glow, letting you know she is feeling completely satisfied? This feeling and that glow can be yours by embracing your sexual power. So join me, Rachel Kenley, award-winning romance author, on the O-Spot. The O-Spot will guide you to that peak with guest interviews, book discussions, and conversations on the thrills of sexual empowerment. Put the zing back in your life. Come up and see me sometime on the O-Spot, live on Hump Day at 10 p.m. Eastern.
What if business could be fun? What if business is the adventure of living? What are you choosing? Where do you do business that makes it easier, more fun, or more joyful for you? We'd love to see where you do business. Connect with us on Instagram at Joy of Business or Twitter at Joy of Business, and share your pictures with hashtags BusinessDoneWhere and Joy of Business. Let's change the world with business.
Have you been searching for a perspective beyond the mainstream? Check it out. Join your hosts Cielito Pascual and Diana Gold Holland on Share International Radio for thought-provoking views behind the news, Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio. You can also find us at shareontheairradio.org. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for.
connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And we're back discussing the life of Jesus from an esoteric perspective with Ann Finneran. I'm Cielito Pascual, podcasting from Seattle. Thank you for being with us. Where were we at? We were talking about the revolutionary ideas of Jesus. Well, not only was he preaching love, I don't know if he would use the term preaching. He was a teacher. He was a rabbi. He was traveling from town to town, sharing his ideas, and people were responding. He was also throwing out the money changers from the temple. He went ballistic there. So he was not a meek and mild character by any means. A very strong personality that within 3 short years of his life presented ideas that live on today. The unfortunate thing is that churches have made Jesus into such a remote figure, an inaccessible, just impossibly remote being that we have no. It's almost we barely have any relationship with. But in the esoteric perspective, he is an ordinary man, yet with the ability to demonstrate extraordinary divinity with humility and simplicity in the spirit of love and service, which was, those energies were demonstrating through Jesus at the time, very unusual. Where in the Bible does Jesus refer to Maitreya? Does he refer to Maitreya?
Yeah, he actually does. There's actually a little vignette just before what the Bible calls the Last Supper. It was actually a Passover supper. And Jesus, the things were coming to a head. As I said, the political factions were starting to get a little agitated, alarmed about Jesus. So he wanted them. They were starting to work find places in secret. So he said to his disciples, "Find a man carrying a jug of water, and he will take you to the place where you will set up the Passover supper." And that little vignette actually happened, and that character carrying the jug of water was Maitreya in a guise as the Aquarian water carrier. So he was he was pointing to the next age, the age of Aquarius, when in the Bible story, and also in
the age of Aquarius, which we're in now, obviously.
Which we're in now. Jesus was the teacher for the age of Pisces, which was the age of the fish. So he found his fishers of men, and another place that kind of refers not necessarily just to Maitreya, but to the fact of the coming age. In John 23, he says, "Now we are children. What we shall later be has not yet come to light. But later we will be adults, and when that comes to light, we shall know that we are like him, for we shall see him as he truly is." So we will realize that, contrary to the perception of Jesus living up in some throne in heaven with the heavenly hosts and the beautiful clouds all around, they actually are down here on earth. We are one of them. We are working our way to their level of enlightenment through evolution.
And Jesus said, "You'll do greater things than I," which underscores that point very much. Which is also revolutionary, because who would want a bunch of Jesuses running around and preaching love when there's so much when there's so much power to control over people who don't realize that they are divine beings. So his teachings were about us discovering our own divinity, not giving our divinity over to another person, which is, we were talking earlier about the hallmark of the age of Pisces was the development. It signified the development of the individual. This is a little of an aside, but that also explains the distinction of the age. Prior to the age of Pisces was the age of Aries, and those times were dominated by a herd mentality. Now, in the age of Aquarius, we go from this finely developed individual to working in synthesis with group consciousness, working together as a group. So that's another way that the Ageless Wisdom teaching shows us how we are evolving in our consciousness. So let's talk about the crucifixion and the resurrection. The traditional Christian view focuses on the death of Jesus, that he died for our sins, and the esotericist focuses on the resurrection. What was the resurrection, and what is its meaning for us?
Okay, well, the crucifixion actually had great importance, not only literally for Jesus, but also symbolically. It refers to the fourth initiation, which is called the Great Renunciation. And as I had said, Jesus was a fully enlightened human being, and the fourth initiation, you give up all that, and you just, give it up so that you become fully infused with spirit. And he literally took his fourth initiation in public for the world, for history, and for the understanding of what that meant. However, the greater experience, the greater story in the biblical story has to do with the resurrection, and that was the raising of Jesus' body. And there is actually a document, a photo document, if you will, of the resurrection, and that is the Shroud of Turin. It is a negative photographic image of the body of Jesus, which was infused with tremendous cosmic radiation, which was necessary in order to make the body fully subatomic, which is the type of body that a master has, the fully subatomic body. Now, Jesus took the fourth initiation. He did not take the fifth, which is when one becomes a master, but his body was created, was resurrected to that of a master's body. And Maitreya used that body for the next, the Bible says, 40 or so days on the planet. And that is really the whole gospel story is a lesson in evolution, in the evolutionary process, in what we all have to look forward to through our lives, through these various expansions of consciousness and lessons that we learn from one life to another. So that's just a tremendous value in the gospel story, and it's so enriching when you apply the Ageless Wisdom teachings to it.
And I encourage our listeners to look up the book. This is a book by the author, the esoteric author, Alice A. Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y. She's written many books. One must read each and every one of them. But relevant to our discussion today, you may want to read From Bethlehem to Calvary, which goes into more detail about the esoteric significance of those expansions of consciousness as they're symbolized in Jesus' life. It's extraordinary that all that he experienced in his lifetime as Jesus did not get him the street cred to become a master. He still needed one more lifetime after that, or a couple, maybe 2 or 3 lifetimes. It's not the evolution of consciousness is almost rather daunting to study, but it's also very moving and very inspiring. So what happened? We're talking about reincarnation. What did happen to Jesus after that? Where did he come? How did he come back? What happened?
Okay. Well, actually, he, according to our information, he did become a master in his next life as Apollonius of Tyana, who is a historical figure, and but after that, after he became a master, he took on his persona as Jesus, and he is known as the Master Jesus. And he, along with the other masters, have really stayed within the Earth scheme, working from retreats, desert retreats, mountain retreats. However, for the last number of years, Jesus has been residing in the area of Rome because of his relationship to the Christian religion, obviously, and his role to correct some of the misinterpretations that have happened in the Christian religion. So, and he works closely, hand in hand, with Maitreya, who is coming out himself at this time on his own, in his own body, as the teacher for this coming age of Aquarius.
So no overshadowing, no intermediary. And
right.
Just in the last minutes here before our break, I want to let our audience know that the masters have appeared to people all around the world. You may have met the Master Jesus. There were many stories of the vanishing hitchhiker, many stories over the years published in Share International about a mysterious stranger who delivers a message, a loving message, a stranger with luminous eyes and a loving countenance, often appearing as a homeless person, and sharing a brief message, and then seemingly vanishing. And oftentimes that was the one of the masters, and oftentimes was the Master Jesus. So they are interacting with humanity right now. After the break, we are going to talk more about the emergence of Maitreya and what this means and how we can play a part. Stay with us after the break.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Want to help humanity and the planet? Transmission meditation is a simple but powerful way for you and 2 or more friends to do just that and dramatically accelerate your own spiritual growth. You can read the book on transmission meditation free online. Visit shareontheairradio.org for details. That's shareontheairradio.org. shareontheairradio.org.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your hosts on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And we're back. We are back on Share on the Air Radio. I'm Cielito Pascual with my wonderful guest, Ann Finneran. We could use another couple of hours to keep talking, but we only have about 8 or 9 minutes left. So let's talk about the purpose, Ann, of why we talked about Jesus. Jesus became a master. He was revolutionary in spreading the message of love thy neighbor. Now it's 2,000 years later. You know, one thing that people don't realize, it may never not have occurred to them, but people think that Jesus kind of, like you said, he's up in heaven and in the clouds, but he's evolved. He continues to evolve. He continues to work. His feet are not up by any means. So here we are today in a very different world than what it was 2,000 years ago. Literally, as you know, as an environmental activist, the world is in peril on so many levels. So let's talk a little bit about the social justice aspect of Jesus and what Maitreya, the world teacher, is here to illuminate for humanity today.
Okay, Maitreya and Jesus, in hand with Maitreya, the world is a sick planet at present, and you can go back and point to the main cause of that whole problem, and that is the lack of right human relations. People get the concept of love. It has come through. It has changed the world in a lot of ways. We take care of our friends. We take care of our neighbors. But we haven't taken that to the level that it needs to be in order to save the planet. We need to learn the principle of sharing, and that is the main purpose and focus of Maitreya, is to instill the principle of sharing in the world. And you can refer back to something Jesus said 2,000 years ago, which ties into it. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. Sick, and you visited. In prison, and you visited. These thoughts, these ideas, still have not fully made it through the bulk of humanity, and it's something that we need to do on a global scale. And through doing that, through learning how to share the world's resources, share our ideas, by sharing the world's resources and realizing that we are really all one humanity, we can resolve all the problems of the world, including the environmental problems, because a lot of the environmental problems are related to material, just the imbalance of the resources in the world.
Well, you know, I think the biggest challenge is for us to reconstruct the prevailing economic system, where you know, so many people are seeing clear as day today that 1% of the population controls a massive amount of wealth on this planet, while many are just struggling to even put food on their table or food into the mouths if they don't have a table, as some families lack in this world, put food in the mouths of their children. And so we're caught in this dichotomy. We've got to let it go. Those of us who are fortunate to be living in prosperous parts of the world, even those of us who, you know, we might think we're broke, some of us have tremendous resources, and we're lucky to be where we are. You know, if you've got food in the fridge, that's a blessing. And unfortunately, we have a prevailing economic system where it's the markets that are priority and not life. And we sacrifice quality of life in order to serve the markets, and it should be the markets serving life. So right there is the absence of right relationship when it's all about money and it's all about materialism, and it's about when it's about ourselves, creating identities based on materialism and consumerism.
Well, Maitreya said one point in messages he gives, which is too complicated to go in now, but they have been published. Messages from Maitreya the Christ is in publication. You can Google it and buy it. But one of its messages says, "My coming portends change, likewise grief over the loss of the old structures. But, my friends, the old bottles must be broken. The new wine deserves better." And interestingly, that refers to an old biblical expression, "Cask ye not new wine in old bottles." So what he is talking about is the restructuring of the world, of the economic, of the environmental, of the social, political. Everything needs to be restructured along lines that will help us not only survive but thrive in the future.
You know, Jesus said, and I bring this up because it's a common reference from certain folks feel like, there'll always be starving children. Jesus said, "The poor you have with you always." And I think there's a big misinterpretation of that as well. Do you want to speak on that?
Well, the poor are really our responsibility. We need to make sure that we all have the means to live and thrive in the world. He has also he said a number of things in regard to that. I'm not sure I really know where that expression comes from.
You know, I did find it in a book.
Okay.
And I will recommend again to our listeners another author, Benjamin Creme, Creme. His very first book, The Reappearance of the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom. That's available online. Also, Maitreya's Mission 1. There's a lot of correlations between the time of Jesus and our time now, and the changes that are ahead. So I encourage our listeners to look to those books for more information. And apparently that biblical reference is the context of it is where Jesus was telling his disciples that they shouldn't. So much of their funds were going to helping the poor, and on occasion the disciples would purchase expensive oils to anoint Jesus with, and he was essentially saying, "Don't spend your money on this. You'll always have to help the poor. You help the poor with that money. Don't use it on me." That's what. Okay,
well, you've enlightened me in that regard. I remember that now.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that got some distortions through the millennia. Now we have 4 minutes to talk about the Day of Declaration, and that is the events are speeding up now. Where Maitreya and the Masters, they are here now. They are here among us now. What will be the difference is their emergence into full public life, and Maitreya presenting himself and his proposition to humanity to begin to share the resources of the world, and that will take place in an event called the Day of Declaration. And you correspond that to a well-known event in the Bible, Anne. An event that has been interpreted certain ways. Why don't you present the esoteric perspective on that?
So we're talking about the Pentecost, and the Pentecost happened according to the Bible about 10 days after the resurrection or the ascension of Jesus' body. And had to be enthroned. The ascension of the body of Jesus, and so the disciples were left with no one. They're in a room, they're gathered, but they're not quite knowing what to do with all these teachings. And the day of the Pentecost had come. They were all together in one place. I'm reading now. Suddenly a sound like violent wind blowing came from heaven and filled the entire house where they were sitting. And tongues spreading out like a fire appeared to them and came to rest on each one of them. All were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages. When this sound occurred, a crowd gathered and was in confusion, because each one heard the apostles speaking in his own language. They said, "Aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that each of us our own native language?" So anyway, so that ties in very closely with the Day of Declaration, because on the Day of Declaration, the Maitreya will appear on worldwide television via satellite and will speak to the whole of humanity.
And people will hear him in their own languages. I hate to cut us off, Ann. We could talk so much more. Thank you for joining us, listeners. Join us again next Sunday. I'll be with Diana Gold-Holland. We'll talk about the most intriguing facts about Maitreya's emergence. Join us next Sunday, 1 p.m. Thank you, Ann, so much.
Thank you.